This week on Bootstrapped, the lighter side, we continue the conversation with Patrick Philley, Lighter Capital's lead underwriter and credit manager, and Tanner Kovacevich, Lighter Capital's VP of sales. We'll talk about how to find the right funding that delivers the best ROI for your startup. Our seasoned experts share their insiders' insights to help you get the most from non-dilutive capital and avoid taking on risky credit deals that can strain your cash flow and stifle growth. Welcome to Bootstrap, the lighter side, the podcast for B2B startup founders wanting to achieve success without giving up ownership or control. This podcast is brought to you by Lighter Capital, the leader in founder-friendly financing for B2B SaaS companies. Learn more at lightercapital.com. Let's just dive right in and talk about when is non-dilutive capital funding the most advantageous. In my experience, a lot of founders don't realize until it's too late that their equity is their most valuable asset. And the longer they can delay equity dilution, the better. Tanner, you've worked with so many companies, over 200 since you've been at Lighter Capital. Can you tell me what you see in terms of founder ownership at the time of an exit?
Yeah, absolutely. Like a portfolio company of ours that comes to mind is a company that came to us when they were at about $4 million in annual recurring revenue. And to date, they had already raised over $18 million from venture capital. And the founder and CFO came to Lighter, saying, I absolutely have the option for another round on the equity side. But at that point, I would lose control over my board. So besides pursuing equity, they ended up doing a total of $2 million with Lighter Capital, and they are now a profitable business. And I think profitability gives you plenty of options when it comes to controlling your own destiny and cap table as a result.
Absolutely. So they were able to reach profitability without giving away not only more equity, but actually control if the next round would have given up another board seat.
Yeah, absolutely.
And many of our portfolio companies do go on to raise equity after working with Lighter Capital or taking non-dilutive funding from Lighter Capital. Another big advantage to using debt to grow a business is getting the traction you need to get better terms and a higher valuation from equity investors if you want to go down that route. Tanner, can you, and I love these examples, but can you talk about a couple of examples there?
Seamless AI is one of our portfolio companies that comes to mind. They came to us when they were at about 4 million in annual recurring revenue as well, and had Series A offers on the table at certain valuations. They forego those term sheets and ended up doing $2 million worth of revenue-based financing with us. Luckily, in 24 months, they actually grew from 4 million to 20 million, which greatly increased their overall valuation and really saved them a lot of equity in the early days, of Seamless AI, which now is a huge business.
Yeah, I know Brandon has been on a podcast previously, and he talks about, it ended up netting hundreds of millions of dollars to him personally because they were able to grow from 3 or 4 million in revenue to 20 million in revenue without any dilution. So when they went to do that big equity round, as you mentioned, their valuation was a lot higher.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And do you have any other examples you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, one of our favorite companies is a company called DBT Labs. In 2019, they did a $240,000 round with us and then went on to raise venture capital. They've been valued at over $4 billion in their past and have raised from Andreessen Horowitz and Sequoia, just to name a few people on their cap table. The founder did say that starting a relationship with Lighter Capital really gave him the confidence to go out and go down the VC path. So I think all in all, it was a win-win situation for both parties there.
Yeah, they really got some early traction with non-dilutive funding. So when they were ready to go out and do an equity raise, they could almost pick their investors. And I think their first equity raise was with Andreessen Horowitz, one of the top VC firms in the world. So I think the kind of the lesson there is that it's not that founders should never consider raising equity, but they really want to be strategic about it and be able to raise when they're able to pick their investors versus the other way around. So when your growth is heading in the right direction and when you're at your strongest point. The one thing I always say is you want to look for money when you don't need it, and that's how you get the best terms. So Patrick, you have been underwriting non-dilutive rounds of financing at Lighter Capital for going on a decade now. What are some of the things founders should be doing to get the most favorable terms on a financing round?
Yeah, I'd say one key piece of advice is managing your cash burn and your cash runway. And runway is essentially how many months your business can operate without running out of cash based on your current cash burn rate. You're always going to be in the strongest position to get capital, take on non-dilutive financing when you have a decent amount of runway, because that looks a lot less risky to capital providers. Too often we see companies seeking financing when they kind of desperately need it. For example, they're just pretty much out of cash, and that's when they come looking for financing. That typically makes a company look riskier, and they're less likely to get approved for terms, or the terms that do get approved are worse for those companies because those terms have been structured to kind of mitigate risk. Um, what this means is maybe look for that loan when you have a good amount of cash and a lot of runway, or when you're not burning a lot, but you might have a plan to use those funds once you get the financing, and maybe increase your burn after you get the financing. And then also just having good runway shows capital providers that you know how to operate your business well, and you're preparing well for the future.
So Patrick, what other advice would you have for companies that want to go down a non-dilutive funding path? What else should they be doing to get their company ready to do so?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say one key thing is to make sure you're keeping your financials in order. We often come across businesses that they might be great growing businesses, but their accounting is just kind of a mess. And so it's really hard for capital providers to feel confident in the numbers that they're getting. We want to be able to make sure that businesses, the financials that they're providing, are painting an accurate full picture of the business. If financials are messy, or it feels like something isn't lining up or something's missing, that essentially translates to uncertainty for capital providers, which all translates to risk. And that could mean less likelihood to get approved or worse terms.
Okay, really good points.
We've seen startups have the most success when they take on non-dilutive funding to grow at an inflection point. Some of these inflection points can be, closing your largest contract to date. Oftentimes, a company, when they do get a large contract like this, need to build out a team around it. Additionally, when you close your largest contract to date, you can often use that case study and experience to acquire more large customers like that. So there could be another reason to build out the team. Another example could be you've identified a lucrative marketing channel that you simply don't have the cash to put more into. So debt could be a good way to acquire customers in that example. Another one could be a sales pipeline. You have a sales pipeline and you only have so many sales people or customer success people, and you want to build out those teams to go out and close those deals as fast as possible. Or, on the more R&D or software engineering side, you've identified a demand for a new product and you need to go out and build it. So that's another way where, debt can really be a good gap filler to get you, to that next goal as a business.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the structure of the financing and does it fit your business model and use case? Tanner, I'll go back to you. In the last episode, you made a great point about something that most founders don't think about when they're assessing capital costs. You said it's important that the term of the financing, that's the payback term of the financing, gives the company time to generate a return on that investment. Can you explain why it's important to make sure the structure of the financing fits the business model and the use case?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a common use case is to hire a salesperson. And when you think about utilizing debt to hire, an account executive in a software environment, that takes, a lot of things to really get consistent production out of any salesperson. It comes with, initially hiring the person, onboarding them, letting them kind of get their feet under them into understanding the product and ultimately closing deals. If a company was to say, take a 12-month term loan to go out and hire a salesperson, well, you might not really get any production from a salesperson in 6 to 9 months' time. So when you bake in whatever the loan may cost you from a fee perspective, you might not really make a positive return on your investment if you have to do it in 12 months. So, oftentimes for strategic hires like that, a longer term, say 24, 36-month term might make a lot more sense to really understand what you have in that key hire.
So some capital providers may offer what appear to be great financial terms, like a large amount of capital and a lower rate or cost of capital, but they make you pay back that capital really fast. For example, in a year or less. Let's say a capital provider might offer you like 800,000, whereas another capital provider offers you only 400,000. However, you have to pay back the $800,000 offer in 12 months versus the $400,000 offer over 36 months or 3 years. For that first offer, the 800,000, a year doesn't really give you much time to utilize those funds. For example, making key hires and letting those hires ramp up or testing out ad spend in different marketing channels. Within 6 months, you've paid back 400,000 of the original 800,000 in principal and whatever interest you pay with that. And you have to pay back the rest in the next 6 months. Whereas with that $400,000 offer, on a 3-year loan or 36-month term, you've only had to pay back a third of it or 133,000 of the original 400K in 12 months. So you still have 267,000 of the original 400,000 after a year. Both capital providers will give you the option to re-up your capital as you grow, but with the longer term or longer payback period option, it gives you more flexibility with cash flow and the ability to plan your business and grow your business. So think about which payback period is going to allow you to maximize the capital that you're getting in order to grow your business and add value to your business. Consider not only the amount and the rate, but how long you have to pay it back and put those funds to use.
Patrick, what are some other terms and conditions that companies should look out for when considering non-dilutive financing?
Yeah, so sometimes lenders might require you to sign a personal guarantee, and that is essentially you as an individual guaranteeing the loan with your personal assets, such as your
Mm.
house or your savings, that you could potentially risk losing if they call the loan and the business can't pay back the loan. You also want to look out for covenants in the terms and conditions of the capital that you're getting. Covenants are like guardrails to keep your business operations within a certain margin of error. That increases the likelihood of you repaying it. Covenants lower the risk for the capital provider and potentially allow them to offer better terms. There are affirmative covenants, which is essentially I shall do this, or negative covenants, which is essentially I shall not do this. But also, many covenants are financial, like specifying the need to maintain a certain growth rate on your business or maintaining the minimum amount of runway or cash in the business. Sometimes these aren't obvious when you're getting into a relationship with the capital provider. So make sure to look out for statements in the contract that use phrases like I shall or I agree to. Financial covenants in particular can add unnecessary risk to your business.
And Patrick,
Yeah.
can you give some examples of what is a financial covenant?
An example of a financial covenant might be a capital provider requiring you as the business to maintain a certain level of cash burn or, for example, EBITDA, or they might require you to maintain or even grow to a minimum level of revenue.
Yeah.
And so if you don't reach or stay within those financial covenants that they've set, you're technically violating the agreement with that capital provider. And so financial covenants can really add unnecessary risk and kind of limit how you operate your business because you're kind of operating your business to fit within what the capital provider has set out for you as opposed to your own goals or as opposed to like the flexibility that you need to do what's best for your business.
Great. And you touched on this a little bit, but what happens when a financial covenant or a covenant is breached? I've been an entrepreneur and run a couple companies. I mean, I'm thinking if I had non-dilutive financing and I had an agreement to pay back so much every month, and I'm doing that, I'm adhering to the agreement, but then my revenue drops, but I'm still paying what I'm supposed to pay every month. I mean, what I hear you saying is that if I had a financial covenant that was tied to a minimum amount of revenue, I might be in default with that in
Yeah,
that
exactly.
loan. Okay.
Yep.
Wow, that's a lot of risk.
Yeah, for sure. You could be paying back your loan, making payments, having no issues with payments. But if you're not hitting that certain metric that they've defined for you when you started your relationship and started that contract, they could technically say that you're in violation of your agreement.
Yeah. Again, what can happen when a covenant is breached?
Yeah, so if a covenant's breached, the capital provider might offer like a cure period, which is like a period to kind of fix that breach or violation. But if they don't have a cure period or if the violation isn't cured, the capital provider is essentially in control and can kind of decide how to handle that situation. Typically, they want to work out a solution that works well for both the business and the capital provider. But legally speaking, they could call a loan or call default. And again, legally speaking, that could mean that they demand that their loan be paid back in full right away. And if it's not paid back in full right away, they have recourse to your business. They have typically have a security interest on the assets of the business, which is called collateral.
Mm-hmm. This is something that Lighter Capital in the 1,100 plus rounds of financing we've done, we rarely have any financial covenants beyond sometimes a minimum amount of cash that we like to see on hand. And that's typically companies also want to have a minimum amount of cash on hand. So that's usually not an issue. But we've seen other capital providers have, some really financial covenants that may not seem onerous at the time they're agreed to, but can really put a lot of pressure on the company, especially when it comes to things like EBITDA covenants and revenue growth covenants.
Yeah, exactly. It can kind of force the business to run their business how the capital provider wants them to run it, as opposed to how they want to run it.
Yeah. Okay. And let's talk about some of the additional benefits from a capital provider. We know the money, that's the main thing, the money to fuel growth. But I'd like to touch on some of the additional benefits. I know from my experience as an entrepreneur that oftentimes the most valuable advice comes from other entrepreneurs who are facing or have faced, similar challenges. At Lighter, we facilitate these connections and communities. And I thought, Tanner, can you talk a little bit about what we do there?
Yeah, absolutely. And you said it in the past, and I think the most value a partner can bring to our portfolio companies is customers. And what we do when we onboard is try to identify all of our portfolio companies that are first in a similar industry sector, whether that's in the education space, legal space, something like that. And then we also look at our portfolio companies who might have a similar customer base, whether it's Fortune 500 companies or specific subsets of customers. And what we try to do is facilitate introductions to those portfolio companies, because if they can work together and potentially find new customers just based on a relationship with us, that helps us as a capital provider, and it obviously helps the business that is in our portfolio.
Thanks, Tanner. That's great. Again, introductions to customers and introductions to other entrepreneurs, we know it can be so valuable. Another thing that we do, I was a VC for the better part of 2 decades. Several of our other investment directors have worked in venture capital. And we know when our companies do want to go down that path, most companies don't go down the dilutive funding path. But for the 20 to 25% of our companies that do go down that path, we can also be very helpful there in terms of helping with their pitch decks and with warm introductions to dilutive capital providers, venture capitalists. Tanner, what are some of the other things that our portfolio companies have access to when they become part of the lighter capital community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lighter Capital has a perks program targeted just for our portfolio companies. And in total, we offer 200,000 in discounts to other software providers and service providers that can help you grow. Some notable ones we have are the AWS, Amazon credit for cloud hosting. And we also have the Google Cloud program, which gives you credits which go directly to reduce a startup's costs, on a monthly basis. We also have other software companies like Forecaster that helps you with financial planning, calculating runway, and they also have their own CFO services. So we offer companies like that at large discounts, or we offer their solutions for free in the AWS and Google Cloud Startup Program.
Great, thank you. Okay, so some closing advice. What are the key things our listeners should take away? Tanner.
Yeah, so I'd say make sure the financing is structured to support your business and goals, whether that's the term length, the amount you're borrowing, or the repayment terms. And also look for the additional value beyond just the money portion of what a capital provider may be able to bring to the table.
Okay, thanks, Tanner. And Patrick, any closing advice you have?
Yeah, if you want to minimize your risk and get the best rates possible, I'd say one, you want to avoid personal guarantees just so you aren't risking any of your own personal assets. Two, if you're agreeing to financial covenants, which are essentially financial metrics that you need to adhere to in the future, or your business needs to adhere to, make sure they minimally constrain your business and that you feel confident you won't breach them. Three, look for money when you have money, not when you need money. Too often we see businesses asking for money when they desperately need it, i.e., when they're out of cash, which leads to worse terms or not getting approved at all. And then lastly, keep your financials in order. Capital providers want to feel confident in the numbers you're providing and that they paint an accurate, full picture of the business. If they're messy or capital providers feel like something's missing, that translates to more risk to them, which could lead to worse terms or not getting approval at all.
Thank you, Tanner Kovacevich, Head of Sales for Lighter Capital, and Patrick Philley, Lead Underwriter. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Bootstrapped, the Lighter Side. And to receive future episodes, subscribe using your favorite podcast platform. If you enjoy this show, please share it with other fellow founders and entrepreneurs. And for more insights, helpful tips, and to learn more about founder-friendly financing options, you can visit us at lightercapital.com.